Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome. Okay. 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 I think I was reading this last time. Yeah. Okay. So we're back with voxel tools, and I was studying the example last time. Yeah. And the written documentation. Oh, I didn't manage to get a second stream yesterday because I was very sleepy. I haven't slept very well during weekends because we have a party here in my neighborhood. And I wasn't able to get my 8-hour sleep, so unfortunately yesterday I wasn't able to do the second stream. Hopefully today I will be able to do a second stream. No guarantees because I also started kinda late today. But probably we'll do a 2-hour stream. 2 streams of 2 hours each. Yeah. So let's see what we're gonna do today. How things are gonna go. First of all, I'm actually curious, how many people are streaming right now on Godot edging? Because yesterday there was no one streaming on Godot edging, so let's take a look. I'm curious. Godot edging, am I the only one? Nope. We have 1, 2, 3 people. 5, 13 viewers, 2 viewers, and me. Okay, seems to be pretty active day. That's good. That's good to know. Okay, so let's go back to our project. Okay. So I'm going through the documentation of voxel tools to get a good idea of how it works. Type channel is for the Minecraft generator. Okay, so later that I was asking to type what the hell type was, because we saw that when we are looking at the nodes. Now we know that these are related to the Minecraft generator, which is the block generator, while the smooth terrain generator uses only the SDF channel. Which kind of makes sense, because SDFs tend to be smooth. You can use SDFs to do blocks as well. You can do cubes if you want with SDFs. So that's not really a problem, but yeah. I don't know if the Minecraft also uses SDFs as well. Probably not, because it doesn't make any sense to use SDFs. SDFs are kind of expensive for something like as simple as a cube. Flat generator, we don't care. Generate case, we don't care. Image generation, this is also for using height maps, so you don't have to use only SDFs. And noise 3D. And this is what we're using. We use the node graph generators, the voxel graphs. Yes, here's a symbol graph that uses a plane. Then we have, what is that? So this one, I think this one also uses a plane. That's a planet. This is what I used SDF sphere for a planet. So you use here normalize for the fast noise to be. Why use normalize? Because we use as a height map. But I don't want that, because if I do that, it will make everything up and down, which I don't like. So a height map usually has an up and down direction, where I want the sphere to have the direction of the sphere. So you can see here, for example, it doesn't use normalize here in this case, which actually uses to create a donut. What do you use exactly? This one is? Nice woman to say. That's a torus. SDF torus. And actually, let me zoom in. That's not a bad idea, so you can guys see this right here. So this is a donut, SDF donut, which is torus, SDF torus, and using a noise multiplied by whatever. And it has this area here, like a ring. It's possible to generate surrounding noise comes from base reference of panels. So this is how you create caves. I wonder when it multiplies. Can we see this now? Multiply by what? It doesn't say. So you want to do a Minecraft kind of look, which I don't here. I increased a bit the bit rate. Seems to be a bit low sometimes. Just testing the connection to see that everything works as expected. See, because I'm keeping track to see what exactly consumes my connection. I think it's a good idea. I have posted music for this reason. Let's see how much kilobytes I consume for yeah, it's a music. Music consumes all the speed sometimes. Okay, let's resume. Okay. So I'm reading the documentation here. You're not gonna hear me talk a lot in this stream because I have to study the documentation and go through it and trying to figure out how things work. Because in order to start making the terrain, because the goal here is to use these voxel tools to create a terrain for the planet. We'll start with one planet. Probably a planet like Earth, some Earth-like planet. But the idea here of the game is that because this is going to be a building game and a first-person shooter, there will be several planets. And this is also going to be based in Greek mythology, so it's going to be sci-fi based on Greek mythology, so it has creatures, monsters, enemies, and all this kind of stuff. But we have to start somewhere, and I want to start with something super basic, so I wanted to make a very simple planet. A bit like No Man's Sky kind of thing. So in No Man's Sky, you don't really have a very complex terrain. I don't think you have much mountains, if I remember correctly. You have more like hills and valleys. So you don't want to make the terrain too complex because obviously that will affect the performance in the generation. And I don't really know how performant the voxel tools really are. So it's going to depend how performant it is because, of course, you have to count in other elements like, you have to have trees, you have to have grass, which those things are outside the procedural terrain generation. They are added on top of the terrain, which is something the voxel tools does permit. I think they have a way to populate the terrain with objects. But again, it's all will depend. The big question here is how performant it is and how well it performs. So the biggest one of the features of these voxel tools is that it's only CPU driven, so everything is calculated on CPU. That's shouldn't be a problem because also, as far as No Man's Sky is almost completely generated on the CPU, and No Man's Sky doesn't have just procedural terrain generation, it has also enemy generation, so the enemies are procedural, kind of semi-procedural because they're using static meshes for making those enemies. And yeah, and it has also procedural generation, I think, for the spaceships. So everything, as far as No Man's Sky, runs on the CPU, but of course, it's No Man's Sky has a lot of clever, intelligent developers that they know what they're doing, and they are probably using a lot of optimization algorithms that I'm not aware of, and I'm not that experienced. So the amount of detail the game is going to have, the amount of polygon count, the amount of the kind of enemies, the animation of the enemies, the way the game is going to play in terms of complexity is going to largely depend on how performant is voxel tools and how easy it is to use the voxel tools, because sometimes it's not just performance you worry about, it's also that you can cram in some extra performance, but when it comes to optimization coding, unfortunately, because you have to deal with multiple threads, you have to deal with GPU acceleration, all those things are great and amazing. It allows you to add a lot more detail to the game, but the problem, however, is that it also complicates the code. So you have to start thinking very differently. And of course, many of those things will not be able to be implemented in GDScript, because right now, the nice thing about this tool is that it has its own visual language, which we saw yesterday, and I will be using for generated terrain, and also completely driven from GDScript, which is what I want to stick with. I don't want to mess too much with C++, because I spent months and months when I was start streaming in C++ trying to implement Python and all this kind of stuff. And my experience through streaming those first 3 months was that you can waste a lot of time coding in C++ or even in C#. So the idea here for me is how to avoid having to write code in C# or C++ and have as much code in JavaScript. But on the other hand, I am so limited in JavaScript because I cannot do performance coding there. So procedure generation has to be using the standard features of voxel tools or the standard features of Godot itself. When you use these features and you don't do heavy calculations on the scripting side, you can get away with really good performance. I don't know also that voxel tools in the future may be also ported in the GPU, so that of course gonna add even additional performance. But right now I'm not really that concerned with making anything really complex instead of a game. It's just a simple game with a simple procedural terrain generation. Few enemies here and there, plants, trees, plant life, animal life, creatures, monsters, spaceships, and bases. So the terrain is using the voxel tools. It's going to be smooth voxels in this case scenario because it's a smooth terrain. But then, of course, going to be using voxels also for constructing the spaceships and the bases, because I wanted to do something like Minecraft from a sci-fi kind of perspective, of course. It's not going to look as Minecraft because I will be using more complex shapes. In Minecraft, you use only boxes, but when you make a voxel game, you can also go for more complex primitive shapes that are not just boxes, so it actually breaks away from that very blocky style that I don't want to have in the game. I don't mind if it's a bit blocky, but I don't want it to be too blocky, like you see in Minecraft. So, yeah, there's always those things have to play into consideration when it comes to the game itself. But for now, the focus is to make the terrain. And in order to do that, we have to understand. Now, for example, instancing we're going to be moving in the future is basically what I was saying earlier. It's how you place those objects on top of the terrain and how you add collision. Because you have to worry about things. The biggest problem with using a voxel terrain is that you have to take into account the collision, right? Because you want the base to sit on top of the terrain, for example. That means you have to have some kind of collision on top of the terrain to be able to, well, not necessarily, but you could, you have to at least be able to detect where the terrain really is. So yeah, I need to know exactly how the voxel tools really works before starting, doing stuff with it, and then realizing that I don't understand how it works, and then going back, reading the documentation, and back to making stuff, and then back to documentation and making stuff. I'm not a big fan of going back and forth with documentation. I prefer reading documentation in one go to have a good idea how things really work, and then go back to it only and only if I really need to. So yes, those future streams we're going to be doing is going to be me focusing on reading the documentation, and maybe next week we'll be focusing more on actually making the terrain, because this is a complex tool and I need to understand how it works in detail. So this is basically what I'm seeing here is streams. The nice thing about this is that when you make a voxel terrain, other than you make a procedural terrain, using voxels, you can also sculpt the terrain, and that is important if you do mining, because as I said earlier on in the previous stream, I'm aiming for something similar to Empyrean Galactic Survival. As a matter of fact, let me put that in YouTube. Yeah, so this is the Empyrean Galactic Survival. You can see here that the spaceship is made out of voxels. It's made procedural. It's made by building block by block. Everything here is procedural generated. There's the star map. The terrain here is voxelized. Again, this is the kind of terrain I'm aiming for. The kind of things you can see that it doesn't really have a lot of diversity. It's more uniform. It has, however, valleys and hills and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, you can see the star bases again that are made out of voxels, the same way that the starships are made. You have, of course, the creatures that sit on terrain. You have the plant life. And it's a pretty. This is of course a more realistic game, which I'm not aiming for. I probably would go for something a bit lower poly and without using textures, because of course here it uses textures. But basically, this is the kind of type of game that I'm aiming for. It's a building game mostly, with of course first-person shooter elements inside. You can shoot enemies and kill. That's an example here. Of course, the biggest work, it's you can do first-person stuff, but you can also use your spaceship to attack enemies. Like we see here, the star bases, spaces that are attacked. You can play with other people. That's also in multiplayer. So yeah, I'm in from that. What is common with my game is this one is also made by a single developer, as far as I know. And the only difference is that he used predominantly, this is made in Unity, and he used pretty much everything you see here, like the plants and some of the devices. I think the devices as well, everything, the plant life, the trees, is a Unity asset. It's actually, he uses ready-made Unity assets, because when you go for this kind of a detail, obviously he goes from a realistic game. Obviously making all those things by yourself is going to be very, very hard, which is why I'm not going to go for using assets, ready-made assets. I will probably build my own assets, but my assets will be a lot lower poly. So it's not going to look like this. It's going to be a lot more simplistic in terms of look. But yeah, it's also going to be a different game, because I have some different mechanics in my mind. This one is much more a traditional sci-fi game with first-person elements. Mine is going to be more fantasy-based, so you're going to have magic abilities and all this kind of stuff, and a bit more of an RPG element as well. For example, one of the things that I miss from Empyrean is lack of missions. We don't have quests and missions and all this kind of stuff, which is I would like to have in my game. So this is more like a sandbox that gives you the tools and tell you go and do whatever you like, and you go to every planet more or less. They have a difference, but at some point they look more or less the same. And the mission system is basically non-existent, right? So it's very basic. So it all depends on the player, and there are a couple of scenarios you can download for this game that because it has a very nice modding support, which is something that also interests me. You can download some scenarios, but mostly it's a sandbox game. My game is also going to be sandbox. It's going to have sandbox, but it's also going to be a lot more story-driven, a lot more mission-driven, a lot more quest-driven, because I feel that these games, even though they give you a lot of freedom, at some point you feel you don't do anything that is important. You kind of lose your direction, and I would like something that has a direction, that feels that it can feel that it has a sense of accomplishment, which I think Empyrean really misses. But other than that, it's a really great game. I really recommend to people that like sci-fi games to go and play it. The graphics are not really that impressive, which is fine for me, because I also not gonna, probably my graphics will be even worse than this. But it's a game that has a lot of depth, which is what I'm aiming for as well. Something that you can spend hundreds of hours in this one, and you can still cannot keep discovering new stuff, which is I really love. So this is where I'm going now, what I'm aiming for. But of course, in order to get there, it's still an extremely long way, and this is not a project that will be finished in a few months. This is going to be a project that will take years and years of development. And right now, the focus is learning how this thing. So it uses something called streams, and streams are basically a way to store. So basically, as you can see here, we have a terrain. However, this is something the video doesn't really show you. You can take the terrain and sculpt it. This is something you can do in No Man's Sky, for example, right? You know very well that mining in No Man's Sky, you basically sculpt the terrain. You actually, create holes inside the terrain and, excavate the minerals inside. Empyrean works exactly the same way. So the problem is, however, because everything is procedural generated, as this terrain is procedural generated, it's not sculpted, it's not someone actually didn't model this terrain, the same way can be said about No Man's Sky. If you reload the game and you have excavate an area of, let's say you create a hole here, that hole is no longer going to exist. So you need a way to store that data and layer that on top of the existing terrain. So you say here, okay, this is the terrain, but because the player has created a hole here, please also add the hole here. So the big question is how you can store this data. So you have to store the voxel data, because what you do when you excavate the terrain, because this one is made out of voxels, you basically modify the voxel itself, which in turn, those voxels turn into an actual mesh. So you actually see the whole visually with your graphic card in your monitor. So this is what streams are doing here. They have a file format that allows you to store modifications that happen on top of the terrain. And it has one called SQLite. Now, for those that don't really know, SQLite is a database format. It's a database. It's a very popular database. If you come from Python, Python comes with SQLite included, so it comes with a database included, but also with an API. SQLite is very nice because it is and one file system. So it's not a database that you distribute around servers like most databases are. It's meant to work locally mostly. I think you can use those as distributed if you want to between multiple computers. But this one works on locally. It usually works locally. And it's a very fast and powerful database. And the nice thing about using an SQL database is that the SQL language is very flexible, very powerful. So basically, you can use the SQLite as a replacement for entity system, right? Most people use entity systems inside games to store things in dictionaries. But the fact of the matter is that SQL databases are a lot more flexible, allows you to combine things together, allows you to divide things. It allows you to create new structures out of existing, like, take data fields and assemble them together, or create new data entities. You can do things that, a simple dictionary is not going to be able to give you. The dictionaries are much more basic types. So I really like the idea of using SQLite, not just only for voxels, which is used here for storing the voxels you've modified, but also for pretty much everything, for enemies, for inventory, for items, for quests. And as a matter of fact, games do use SQLite in many case scenarios to do something like that, or some kind of database system. So SQLite is something that interests me, and I really like the fact that, this tool really utilizes that. And that is the important thing here, is that SQLite database file stores the voxels we modified, but also stores the instancing data. By instancing data here, it means all the objects that are based on top of the terrain. It includes the player, the spaceships, the animals, the plants, the objects, the crates, whatever you put on the terrain, it's going to be an instance data. So that is very important, because it allows us also to tie that to, let's say, an SQL database for the kind of items we have. But you have the level of the item, the type of the item, the health of the item, if the item has a health like durability, etc. The meta tags, for example, the characteristics, the magic characteristics, whether it has magic properties, etc. So a lot of things. Then you have region files, which I think stores things in terms of regions. But I will be using most likely this, which I assume also is the most popular format. So this region, and this one is the block files, which says that this is a legacy one, probably will be removed.
A decade ago, Charlie Sheen was...
Okay. Still going strong, I see. Oh, Snow Sierra, long time no see, man. How you doing? Where you will be hiding? I see you don't stream anymore. How you doing? Do you stream? The last time I visited you, you didn't seem to stream. Let's take a look. Snowy Sierra. So the last time... Ah, you do stream. Oh, wait. Do you stream? No. No. No videos. What happened? I'm doing great. I also stopped streaming for a few months. And then now I'm back. Hopefully I'm back for good. And I'm not gonna leave again. How about you? Are you planning to get back to streaming? I don't stream anymore. I was getting less and less productive with fixed game dev time schedules. Okay. So are you still making games? Are you still do game development? Now I'm doing game dev whenever I need to, doing whatever needs to be done. Okay, that's fair. That's fair enough. I am back to this, hopefully for good. And I'm trying to learn how to use voxel tools by Zilan, which is a nice Godot module that allows you to create procedural terrains, because I want to make a game for sci-fi game with planets, like No Man's Sky. And I would like to have procedural terrains for the planets. So right now we study how to save modifications on terrain, which basically means how to store anything you change on the terrain, like excavating the terrain for minerals, metals, etc. I released a new game on Steam, and now I'm very busy with fixing all player issue post-launch. I'm still unexperienced enough to prevent that. Link your game on the chat. I want to take a look at it. Released a new game on Steam. Well, let me take a look at it. Provide a link on the chat, please. It's expensive version. It's this one. Okay, let's take a look at it. Oh, the Endless Thief, of course, yeah. The Endless Thief. Oh, you released it. Nice. When was it released? 26. Ah, you have released it 26 months. You have released it a month ago. Let me stop the music a bit. Cool. I'm overhauling the visuals because the game still looks a bit bland, and I still need to learn how to do trailers properly. I think the game looks fine. Is it for Linux as well? I probably would play for Linux. Let me buy it. Purchase for myself. Actually, let me put it there so I don't refill any code. Okay. Yes. It's only €4, so that's not expensive. Okay, let me buy it, purchase. Okay. So, we have to install it now. Okay. So, let's see where we're gonna find it. Endless Thief, right? Endless Thief, here it is. Install. Yep. 200 megabytes, perfect. Finish. And it's going now downloads. Okay, so I will play it. I already bought it, man. Don't buy. I all bought it. It's already bought it. I don't need a key. Thank you very much for offering a key, but I will have bought it anyway. So, yeah, man, no problem. I wanted to test it for you and see how it works because I really like the game. I'm not a big fan of 2D games, I have to confess, but I really like that one because you had this kind of mechanic of stealth and really reminds me a lot of Thief, which was one of my favorite games. Thief, of course, you also name it Endless Thief, which probably it's a reference. Is it a reference to the Thief game? Probably it is a reference to the Thief game. And I really like that game. I haven't played a game that uses shadows for a long time, like apart from yours. So yeah, I kind of like the game. I think it was a nice game. I really like the music as well, if I remember correctly. And yeah, if we don't support each other, of course I want to support people. And I actually want to buy a couple of other games for Godot, to tell you the truth. So I'm gonna give it a try on Steam. Probably I will play it one time. Not right now because I want to focus on making written documentation. But I will one of my streams I will play it and tell you. First of all, let me put it on. What is it? City Endless Thief. CTE. Endless Thief, here it is. One thing I want to do is make sure that... Okay, let's make sure that it actually opens. Because, you know, I'm on Linux and you never know with Linux. Just make sure that it opens, turns on. Okay, so it seems to play. Okay, let's go to options. Let's go to full screen off. Okay, so it plays well at 1080. That's great. That's the only thing I really was worried about, but seems to play nice. Okay, so I probably have go. Let's go back, and I will play it in another time on stream. Seems to work fine on Linux. So I will actually test you on Linux. I usually use Linux, so yeah. Oh yeah, it's a reference to the old Thief games. I still enjoy the community missions, they are great. Yeah, I was watching about NoClip, a nice documentary they have for the Thief project. I didn't know that it was made by a small company. I always thought that Thief was really a AAA game, but I mean, it's kind of made from a company, obviously. It's not an indie game, technically, but it was like an indie game. It was made from a small company. And yeah. And I love to watch you play the game. When you have time, I was able to write down 68 issues, improvements from the last playthrough. Or you can play the Linux native version. It's hidden in the Steam game folder. Well, it plays through Proton, from what I've seen. I don't think. Usually these games that are 2D, they play on Linux without any problem through Proton. So I doubt that you're going to have any issues. Especially Godot games play well. Windows Godot games play well on Linux through Wine, which Proton in Steam. Steam Proton is basically Wine. It's a custom version of Wine. So I don't think I'm going to have problem. I rarely have problems playing games on Linux. To give you an idea, these are the kind of games I have. Apex Legends plays perfect. Ark Survival, I have a problem with some of the textures, but other than that, plays great. Avorion. Elite Dangerous, Cycle, which is the new game. Even the Cycle that was just released, I played on Linux. It plays great. I had like one crash in... No, actually this one because I haven't installed BattleEye. Empyrean, which is the game I showed earlier on, that's also a Windows-only game that I copy from, which is my inspiration. Also plays perfect on... EVE Online plays fine. This one actually, Heroes of Hammerwatch, I have to play that again. Loop Hero, Nomad Sky plays well on Linux. Rimworld, Space Heaven, Stellaris, Vampire, The Masquerade, The Blood Hunt, and Warframe. Even Warframe, which is a very demanding game GPU-wise, plays well on Linux. Pretty much every game you see here plays well on Linux. Most of the games I have. You know, with Steam, it has gone a long way to support games on the Linux platform that are actually Windows games, because many of those games have BattleEye, which is the pain to support on Linux, because BattleEye is using some kind of Windows kernel functionality to detect whether you cheat on it. And that creates a problem for Wine, because Wine doesn't have that level of emulation. But nowadays Steam has also made, because the nice thing with Steam Deck, because Steam Deck runs on Linux and it relies on Proton, in order for the companies to be able to port their Windows games, because many of them use BattleEye. I think BattleEye is like 60-70% of all the games that use some kind of added cheat use BattleEye. And yeah, and they made a BattleEye version for Linux. And now many games that they used not to work, like Apex Legends, that didn't work on Linux. They work Linux, even though you play the Windows version, which is great, which is really amazing. Which makes also very easy for games like yours, which are much more based. They don't use an added cheat, or they use only 2D graphics, so they're not going to have any they don't need any fancy GPU acceleration features. Usually 2D games with Unity and Godot, 2D games play without any problem on Linux. I rarely seen a 2D. I don't think I ever see a 2D game not playing on Linux through Proton at all. It's very reliable. When I started using Linux, I used it as a joke, because I really liked this operating system. But I know that I probably will not be staying with it very long, because I kind of like playing games, so I couldn't really play most of the games that I liked, because I tend to like games that are a bit more demanding. But nowadays, I don't need to go to Windows. I don't use Windows at all, because of how all those games can play them. Godot plays well through Proton on Steam. Native Linux Godot doesn't always play well through Steam, really, because Steam messes with the binary, really. Native Linux Godot doesn't always play well with Stream? Wow. Yeah, because Steam messes with the binary. Wow, okay, I didn't accept that. So no longer officially support Linux through Steam, only Linux support on it. Yeah, I was thinking doing something similar with my game as well. But yeah, I mean, I will probably have a Linux version, because I will be developing on Linux. So I don't really know how I'm going to do that. But then, of course, on the other hand, if you have a one Windows version on Steam, if it can play on Linux, I mean, there's no problem there. I don't think I will be doing anything that will compromise the ability of the Windows version to play on Linux through Steam, Proton. So I think we'll be fine. And probably I will do the same thing you do on each version, if I have the each also I was thinking basically I was thinking about the game was doing the following. Have the game through each be free to play and develop it up to an point until it becomes early access on Steam. So I was thinking of making early access like in a few years. And when I make an early access on Steam, when I decide to make an early access, it will have to have all the basic features already included in the game. And in early access, I will just work on the secondary features, like things like extra things that I want to have, extra content. So I will have the free version on itch.io as a demo version, and the Steam version as the full game version on Steam. So I was thinking doing it like that. I think that it will make sense, because from one side, if you make it free to play as a demo, without being a demo basically, you still will be able to play the game for hundreds of hours. You will just not have access to everything. So it's going to be a more limited version, which is going to be free, and everybody's going to be happy with it, because you still will be able to do a lot of things you will be able to do with the commercial version. And then have the full version for those that want to support the project have access to extra features as well. And the Steam version is happy because I know that Steam is not happy when you try to sell something that already exists in other platforms, but you sell it cheaper on itch.io and you'd say it's more expensive on Steam. I think Steam doesn't like that. So I think that kind of model makes sense, to have a free version on itch that is going to be older. It's going to be an older version. And a commercial version. But I also don't really know how big the game is going to turn, because I think that itch.io has a limit of 2 gigabytes, I think. There's a limitation, how large you can get. Although I've seen the developers saying on itch.io that they can host even larger files if you contact them, and probably you can come to arrangement when it comes to, you know, maybe pay something or whatever, right? I don't know. We'll see when the time comes. I did the same thing with Endless Thief. It was free to play on itch for over a year during development until the game was fully formed enough for a demo and full version. It's great for player support and feedback. Yeah, exactly. That's what I want to do as well. A free version on itch.io. I probably will keep the itch.io version free forever, and you will be able to get the full version only on Steam or something like that. We'll see. We'll see. You know, this is basically very into the future anyway, so I don't really care right now. We'll see how it goes. And itch.io maybe also support a bigger version of games in the future, because I see more and more big games are having actually an itch.io release, which is good news for itch.io because it makes that the platform makes more and more money. So yeah, we use the streams to save voxel data. For those that are new to the stream, right now I have make a very basic planet, which is let me show you what kind of things I'm working on. So if I go to here, coding, Cyclops, and do a build, build shades, open executable. And we go there. So this is, sorry, what? This is my planet. So if I go and take a look at the planet, wait, what? What happened? Why it's a perfect sphere? What the hell? Did I do something stupid? What is that? Okay, that's weird. Wait a second. Wait a second. Fast noise. Oh, that's why. Yeah, I forgot to connect those two. Let's regenerate. It should work now. Yeah, so this is the terrain I'm making. So this is the tool that allows me to procedurally generate terrain. And you can see the terrain is like that. So, as you can see, it has a level of detail automatically, which is great. And I'm working now how to make this more realistic, because right now it's just small hills and valleys. I want, of course, to make it more organic, to have mountains and riverbeds and lakes and all the nice stuff. And that will require a lot more, playing around with the properties there. So that's what I'm doing right now. And you can actually sculpt this. And you can sculpt it like you can sculpt in No Man's Sky. So in order to store these changes you do on the terrain, you need something that's called a stream. Which is this one, and stores all those changes you do, so you can actually add mountains if you want, or you can sculpt, tunnels inside the terrain if you want to excavate something. So it's a very powerful feature, and it uses SQLite, which is a very powerful database to store any change you do to the voxels, and stores those things to a hard drive, and loads things depending on how far out from the player. So if it's very far from the player, usually it doesn't load the detail. You see the terrain as it's procedure generated, so you don't see the holes or the excavation. But when you come close as a player, it loads the results like it does with level of detail. And allows you basically to have an infinite amount of changes on the terrain. Well, technically not infinite, because of course you're going to need an infinite amount of space on the hard drive. but because it streams those things, it does load them only when they are needed. It doesn't consume a lot of memory, only consumes the disk space you actually. And because there are voxels, they don't really consume that disk space either, because they change the voxels. It doesn't store the actual mesh. It only changes the changes on the voxel themselves, and the voxel data is a lot smaller than the mesh data. So you can get a lot more a lot smaller save files. Otherwise, the save file will be massive. We had on the Nintendo QA team a list. I'm very impressed by how well Nintendo games work at launch without any need for post-launch patches. To tell you the truth, if I want to be honest about you, bugs don't really matter. Now, this is the controversial subject, but that's my personal opinion. Bugs don't really matter. I'm going to take a look at something like Cyberpunk, a game that could easily avoid all those bugs. Take a look at No Man's Sky. When it was released, it was a mess. It was a literally mess. It was like someone intentionally wanted to torture the players. I'm not talking here about a game like yours, which may have a couple of bugs here and there, right? No one's gonna care about that. We're talking about here that they intentionally are designed to make players' life a living hell. And the cycle, the game that I'm playing right now, which is this game here, which is all very popular on Steam right now, every big streamer plays it, which is basically Tarkov in space. It has a lot of problems. It doesn't have as many bugs. It has some bugs, like collisions problems, and it has also huge problem when it comes to cheaters. There's a lot of cheating happening right now in this game. Still, it hasn't stopped the game from becoming very, very, very popular. It has already 14,000 reviews in a matter of 13 days. In 2 weeks, you get 40,000 reviews. Those reviews are mixed, which basically gets a lot of negative reviews because of how many cheaters there are and how buggy the game really is. However, 40,000, if you multiply 40,000 by 50, which is usually the multiplication factor, so for every review you get, let's say 40,668 multiplied by 50, which is for every review you get 50 people buying the game. You get almost 1 million people. Now the game is priced at, it's free. It's free to play. So yes, a lot of people playing it. So almost 1 million of people playing the game right now. And, this is a buggy game. So my opinion is that bugs in the game don't really matter that much. People play buggy games. I play buggy games. I have never not play a game because I know that it's buggy. So as long as your game really works most of the time and it has a lot of bugs, it's not really a problem. Of course, fixing the bugs it should be a goal. You don't want your players to suffer without a reason. But I will say don't worry about the bugs. Don't really affect how successful a game is. It's just an annoyance. That's about it. It's not really a reason why people don't play the game in the end of the day. But you may be getting a lot of negative reviews. That's the only downside. But negative reviews don't really matter that much because still this game has a ton of negative reviews and still is, like almost 1 million people have bought the game. You are working on Star Citizen, No Man's Sky style planets. Yeah, not exactly Star Citizen because Star Citizen is using a lot of very complex procedure generation. Probably not as advanced on No Man's Sky either, because No Man's Sky doesn't use procedure generation only for planets, used for creatures, for spaceships. So something a lot more basic than that. I also say I'm using these tools here, voxel tools, which is by Zilan, which is a great guy. You can find him also on the Godot server, Discord server. And this is the kind of terrain I'm aiming for. Something very simple. I don't care about making something super complex. So yeah. The tool already does that for me. I don't need to do anything. The only thing I'm learning right now is how to use this tool to get the job done. So I don't implement the procedure generation myself. It's already implemented for me. So it's basically a Godot tool, Godot module you download and you can build together with Godot. And it offers you quite a lot of features for blocky terrains, which is basically more Minecraft type of terrain. And also you can use the system for making procedural meshes, procedural objects. It's not just for terrain. I mean, terrain is one thing you can use most commonly, but you can use it for other stuff as well. So instead of the real-time procedural generation, you pre-generate, store it, and stream the data when necessary for performance. It is procedural generated, so you have the terrain generated. So here it's procedural generated. This is Empyrean. It's procedural generated, but if you go and create a hole in the terrain, let's say you use the mining tool and you're just mining the terrain, it will create a hole, right? It's going to create like a cave inside, and you go inside the terrain and you're trying to find the minerals. That's this way. No Man's Sky is doing that through mining, for example. So if you do go No Man's Sky mining, so you go mining. Let's see if he shows us how the mining works. Yeah, probably will not show you how mining works. Yeah. When you search for something, you cannot find it. So mining tool, let's say mining tool. Okay, let's take a look at this. Come on. Mining tool tutorial. Seriously? Is it so difficult to find a gameplay with mining? Wow. Wow. Seriously? Is that difficult? Really? Oh yeah, I think this one is mine. Okay, let's take a look at this. Yeah, here it is. Okay. So as you can see, this is what's basically what means by excavating terrain. Now, when terrain is procedural generated, what happens is that you remove voxels in this case, which is why it creates this sphere effect. This basically removes voxels from the terrain. So voxels are like cubes, and you remove them, and because they use an approximation, they smooth out into the sphere you see, basically. Because when you smooth out a box, it turns more like to a sphere. However, because you modify the procedural terrain, which is generated real time, you have to store also the changes you made to the terrain. So you need a way to store those changes, because otherwise they're going to be lost. The next time you load this and you have made a call there, it means that the hole is not going to be there, because the terrain is going to procedurally generate it again using the shell algorithms, and instead it's going to be full. It's not going to have any holes in it. So you have to add the holes the next time the player loads the game. So how you store those holes, how you store these tunnels you create through excavation. And one way to do that is using streams. You basically store the data of modified voxels into your hard drive, and then you check whether your player is near those holes. If they're not near the holes, you don't load them, because there can be an amazing amount of holes. You don't want to load all this data to the memory. You only load what the player can see immediately next to him or her. So yeah, in order to do that, you have to have a way to store the data you modified the terrain. And sometimes you don't make holes, you can also make mountains, you can add terrain on top of that, you can create all sorts of things, depending on kind of modification you have. Casper, Dragon Wolf, it whenever walks out to find something when you want it at the moment, yeah. So as you can see here, it makes the hole like this. Voxel tool allows you to do that as well. It has the ability to sculpt the terrain if you want to. So the streams we are talking here is how you store these modifications into the hard drive. Only the modification, not the actual terrain. The terrain is completely procedural generated. It uses just path. So that is already stored as nodes that you assemble together. Bugs are not really the issue in Endless Thief. Players actively ignoring objectives, doing their own thing because the game allows them to do so, but then the game punishes them for it was the last issue of So this is a balance issue. So now I'm trying to keep in mind to do the opposite of what the game says for playtesting and sloppy playing, and checking for if the game is still fun and rewarding. Yeah, exactly. Which is why you need players to play their game. The more people play your game, the more they're going to tell you what's wrong with it, and the more you're able to improve it. So there is no game that is perfect or even good enough once it's first released. All games have a lot of problems when they're released. There are a lot of stories about games that had unfair mechanics that allows you to accumulate a lot of wealth using tricks, or people abusing the mechanics of the game to just get infinite amount of resources or something like that. And of course, the developers are not aware of these problems because they may have tested the game beforehand, but you cannot test it as many as thousands of people that are playing the game. So it makes sense that you're gonna release the game and then you come back and you have a lot of updates that may take you weeks or even months, even years to fix some of the issues. And of course, if you have a ton of issues, you need a lot more time. So yeah, that's part of the game development, I'm afraid. Yeah. So storage and streaming is for persistent player world modification. Exactly. It's for persistent player world modification. It's for the ability, because look at he's dying here. He left the planet completely. So you don't really care about the holes that happen in that planet, right? But if he comes back and lands on the area that makes the excavation there, you have to load those changes back. So you have to know a system that knows exactly what the holes are, what the modifications are. It has stored them in the hard drive, and loads them only and only if the player is very close. Right now, of course, player left the planet completely, so you can unload those because you have to load them from memory to memory and display them as a mess, and then you have to unload them from memory if the player leaves. And that is why it's called streaming, because it does happen real time, right? You have to load and load things all the time if the player has heavily modified the terrain, because you don't know how much the terrain has been modified. The player can go and modify the entire planet if the planet is really small enough. Although I don't really know how large the size of No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky planet size. How large is the size? 75? It's small. It's small. So the long story is that the world in No Man's Sky is a very large place to explore, but it's not exactly planet-sized in reality. It took Kearney exactly 11 hours, 50 minutes to walk almost halfway around the planet. If one assumes he's walking 74 miles in diameter. So how we can change, find radius of a sphere from diameters. Oh shit! What? Wait! What? I said diameter. If it's diameter, then it's 37 kilometers. It's still pretty big. 37 kilometers radius. So in No Man's Sky, the planet is 37 kilometers radius. In my game, the planet will be only 2 kilometers radius. 74 is still pretty big. So one game that actually has real-size planet, that I'm pretty sure it has real-size planet, is Elite Dangerous. And I think probably also Star Citizen has a real-size planets, because real-size planets get to thousands of kilometers. So you have like a planet Earth, it's 6,000 kilometers radius. It's a very large radius. And the problem with having such huge radius is that you get a lot of floating point errors. So you have to be very, very, very careful when you do calculations. You can have a lot of problems like jitters, like player teleporting to random places. So this is why I'm going to be going for much smaller planets. My planet will be only 2 kilometers, because I think that is also the size in Empyrean. In Empyrean Galactic Survivor, also the planets are very, very small. They're, I think, around 2 kilometers in radius, maybe a bit more than that. What I think is interesting is that a company well known for releasing their high-quality games, Valve, stopped using QA staff and required game developers themselves to playtest at least one day a week, and it really works well for them. Again, you know, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it used to be that companies used to be very, very careful in the kind of games that were releasing. They wouldn't release a game unless they knew for a fact it was really stable. And you know, back in the 80s and 90s, the games were rarely. I rarely remember a game crashing on me or having a serious problem. Definitely not the mess that Cyberpunk was. Cyberpunk with the T-pose characters. I never experienced a T-pose character in a game I played, like, ever. So Cyberpunk especially, and No Man's Sky, had massive amount of bugs. And I think what happened with No Man's Sky is that people realized that the game doesn't need to be good to be good. People realize that, you know, it doesn't really matter. In the end of the day, if the game is really already oppressive, because one of the great things about No Man's Sky, it had a lot of problems, but it already was a really impressive game, which is why people stopped playing it. They didn't really care that it was a scam. They didn't really care that, you know, the developer wasn't delivering even 1% of the promises. They cared that the game was pretty good enough already. And if you see the No Man's Sky, the early releases were, graphics were a bit average, you know, a lot of issues, a lot of bugs, you can go through the terrain, you can land in space and some crazy stuff. So, but they fixed that. It took 3 years and they added a lot of features, they fixed a lot of bugs. And nowadays you go to No Man's Sky on Steam, and how many? No Man's Sky Steam. How many reviews it has? It has 200,000 reviews, mostly positive. This is a game that was mostly negative, right? So, the recent ones are all very positive. So, if we do calculation here, and we say 182,330 multiplied by 50 players per review, that is basically 9 million sales minimum. He actually sold at least 9 million copies. And that is for an extremely buggy game, right? A really, really buggy game. It made 9 million in sales. So yeah, you can go a long way. And it took 3 years for the game to really become very pretty stable. Elite Dangerous has a thing for realism. Yeah, Elite Dangerous is very realistic. Elite Dangerous actually models after the real Milky Way. They have they feed data from a database that exists for the Milky Way that shows where its star is positioned, if I'm not mistaken. And they're trying to make a clear emulation of that. They actually simulate the Milky Way itself, which means that in Elite Dangerous you have hundreds of billions of stars systems you can go. Those type of games do need a full-time game dev soul. If a game is ambitious or unique, bugs won't matter. No, because No Man's Sky is a small team. People tend to forget that No Man's Sky is not a AAA game, it's an indie game. It is an indie game. It is a very small team. It was like 4 people, 5, I think. And now they have a full team. I think they have like probably 20, 30 developers. I still think they are pretty small as a developer studio. They're not that big. And they are not AAA at all. This is an indie game. You know, it looks now very, very polished for indie game, but it took a long time for No Man's Sky to get to this place. So yeah, you can do a lot of things with if you give time to fix your game and improve it. So you need a team of full-time game devs there. Yeah, you need a team for something like this. Yeah, you need at least a 10 dev team, a 10 people dev team. Yeah, and that without including the artists, the musicians, the beta testers, you know, the community managers. Yeah, you need 10 developers to make something like this. But you know, to be fair, No Man's Sky is extreme innovation, right? They procedure generate, those spaceships are procedure generated. The planets are completely procedure generated, including vegetation and animals. I mean, yeah, you need people that actually gonna work on the code quite a lot. Yeah, but No Man's Sky is still a 3-year project done by full-time game devs. It still is in a different league than, say, part-time total game dev. Yeah, exactly. But you have to remember here that you take 1/4 or 1/10 of No Man's Sky, like 1/10, 10% of No Man's Sky, right? You don't get as much realism, you don't have as many enemies, you don't have as many features. You get 10% of that. And you still have a game, because a game that will sell at 20,000 reviews, which means you're gonna have a billion players playing your game. That still is a very successful game. And do you know which game is like that? Well, the game that's like that is the game I'm based in my fear of, Empyrean Galactic Survival, which is on Steam. And this is a game that is 1/10 of No Man's Sky. It's made by one developer. This is a single developer game. Still has 20,000 reviews, which means it has 1 million players that actually bought the game. It cost 20 euros. Now it's on a sale, but still costs 20 euros. It still is almost as old as No Man's Sky. As a matter of fact, I think Empyrean released before No Man's Sky. Empyrean released, I think, in 2016 or 15, I think 1 year before No Man's Sky. So this one is actually misleading because the game was in early access until 2020. So this is actually misleading. The game is actually pretty much as old as No Man's Sky. And it has procedural terrain generators, but of course it's a different thing. It uses voxels and mechanics and building mechanics. It's a different game. But yeah, you can say this is 1/10 of No Man's Sky, and still you have a game that's very successful because you have like 1 million people buying the game. For a solo developer, it's great. And I can tell you this one also is not very tested. When it was released, it also was very buggy. As a matter of fact, this game was released, it had only a single solar system. It didn't even have multiple solar systems. It had one solar system with 5 planets, and after a few years, they released the ability to visit other planets. Because yeah, this one also has solar systems and galaxies and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, by decreasing the scale of your project, you still have a very, very good game. Because frankly, I played, if you go to where's my Steam? Did I? No, I think, where's Steam? Steam. So if you go here to my Steam, how do I see? Here it is. So Elite Dangerous have 3,000 hours almost, 2,500. 700 hours in Empyrean. Ark Survival is very close because I always play Ark Survival. And then look at No Man's Sky, only 200 hours. So I end up liking Empyrean more than I like the No Man's Sky. Now, of course, No Man's Sky is more successful, no problem. But I do like Empyrean more because it has more sophisticated building mechanics. It allows me to build my own spaceship. I can design my own spaceship however I like it, which I find it a lot more fun. Or I like, Ark Survival more because it has dinosaurs. So you can see here that you can go a long way with just a solo developer. And this is a solo developer game. I think he has hired some artists, etc., but he's mostly working by himself. I think it's a 1 or 2 developer project. So yeah. Love how people focus on the end result instead of just look at the start and move forward from there. Yeah, exactly. How people focus on the end result instead of just look at the start and move forward. Yeah, exactly. Because you can start with something very basic, low poly, super simple, easy to make. You don't have to spend like 20 hours a day developing it because it's a lot smaller the scope. And then you build from there. You want to make, even No Man's Sky wasn't really anywhere near that size that is now in 2006 when it was released. It didn't have like 1% of the features that it has right now. It takes a long time to really get there. And you build from there. You start from a small project, you complete that. You start from a small game, you complete that. And then you keep adding stuff to the game until it becomes to the size you want to take it. And if it doesn't back the size you take it, it doesn't matter because you still have a complete game. You can still sell it, you can still make money out of it, and you can still people play and enjoy it and motivate you. Instead of wasting your life developing a game for 10 years, why not develop for 2 or 3 years, release it as early access, and build it from there? People often focus on the end result of the development, gameplay, and so on. Instead of doing that, focus on beginning, starting the work, and progress as you go, and you will get there where you want to be. But you don't get anywhere if you don't start at the beginning. Exactly. This is why the game that I'm aiming for is going to be low poly. It's going to be not have any textures, simple animations. I will go with the features that the the voxel tools I have. I'm not gonna go for sophisticated terrain generation, all this kind of stuff. Very simple stuff, something that I can do, something I can make. And from there, you have the future in front of you to do whatever you like. You can make, I can go inside the voxel tools and, improve the code. But that's going to happen after I have the early access. Until the early access, as a matter of fact, my goal is how to make the game in such a way that is completely made in GDScript. Because if I make it in GDScript, it's going to be a lot easier than messing with C++. C++ is going to be a pain. Casper Drone Wolf. I agree. It's what I'm doing as well. Developing games, releasing them, building on top of prior experience to be able to release a better game with a large scope. The nice thing is you guys work on 2D games. And 2D games are easier to make, right? It's simpler to make. It's much quicker to make the assets. The mechanics of the game are usually a lot simpler. So you don't have much of a big problem. The problem is me, because I make a 3D game. And 3D games are notorious easy to expand in scope and have something that it's just too big in no time. When I started, I was thinking of making procedural the enemies, procedural the trees, and I realized if I do that, yeah, it's gonna be massive. Same here, developed Godot Manager. Godot Manager, that tells me something. I think I've heard somewhere, Godot Manager. I think I've seen that somewhere, Godot Manager. Godot Manager. What is that? To-do manager? Is this yours? Godot Manager? If Mario? So I developed a Godot Manager to manage my projects, engine versions, and then started working on Born CG tutorial for 3D Move and Dodge game built from it. So this one is your project, Godot Manager. What is this? Yeah, I've heard it because it was for installing projects, right? Plugins, etc. Oh, nice. I may give it that a try. What? That's my. Yeah, that's mine. Okay, mine, not fine. Okay. So this is yours. Nice. Okay, let me start this. And let me also store this. Actually, let me put it here. We're gonna give it a try later. It looks really nice. I really like the UI. Versions of Godot from the official repository. When you create a new project, you can select which plugins you want to include in your... nice. As well, select the template you want to base your project on. That's very nice. So many nice tools for Godot, man. This is one thing I'm thinking of doing. It's just go inside Godot community and finding every library. For example, there's a dialogue system I know that I may be using for making dialogues in game. There are database systems. There are unit testing systems. There are so many libraries available from the community, and probably I will try to use. Now I'm actually focused on voxel tools, but there are also many other tools that I'm going to use for physics, for any or scan. 2D games are an intentional choice. I am also exploring different genres, see what works out. Once I have released about 5 games, I could work on a 3D sequel or spiritual successor. I think it's less risky, time-wise, than immediately going to in 3D, although I personally prefer 3D. Yeah, this is one of the reasons why this is my first game I work on 3D directly, because I'm not a fan of 2D games generally. And definitely it's not really something I like to do. I don't like, to paint with pixels so much. I prefer using something like Blender, making 3D models, because that's what I'm mostly familiar with. And 99% of the games I play are usually a 3D anyway, so for me it's not much of a choice. I have to make the game in 3D. I must make the game 3D, otherwise I will lose interest very fast. Okay, so I'm working on release 0.20, which will add Tux family mirror support. What is Tux family? Tux family. Tux family. Free hosting. Oh. Okay, so this is like a hosting thing? Pretty very much makes sense for space games. No, I don't think so, because you have a lot of nice space games. I do have some 2D space games that I like. For example, one game I really liked a lot is Space Heaven. Really nice. Very nice game. Space Heaven is really highly recommended. Amazing art style. Of course, I cannot make this kind of art style. Let me see. Yeah, you have it here. Look at this. This is really great game. That's amazing art style. Okay, let me show it here as well. Look at this. It's beautiful. It's very beautiful. The art style is great. So you can do it. For example, I could have made this game in 2D if I wanted. I mean, there was nothing stopping me from making it 2D if I wanted. But of course, you know, usually the games I like 2D, it's the ones that have very good art style, and I cannot paint. I'm not really that good at making pixel art. But this is really great pixel art. This is beautiful, beautiful game. It's official mirror for Godot edging. Lurking a bit, need to do something here at work. Yeah, I'm about to end the stream as well. I'm gonna take a 2-hour break and then come back. Hopefully I'm not gonna guarantee everything, guys, because you know, I was tired yesterday. I thought I would do another stream, but we'll see how it goes, because I will be back at 8 o'clock. I may be tired by then. So maybe there will be another stream for 2 hours in 2 hours. I don't say for certain. So for now, if you're going to play my game for feedback, please wait for a week. I plan on releasing another big patch next Monday. That will fix the last issues from the previous playtests. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you mean playing on stream? Yeah, okay. I can wait. No problemo. So let's see, who is streaming right now Godot edging? Because it's time for me to take a break and eat. Okay, we have Risey. We have people. Quite a lot of people, actually. I'm gonna go with Risey. Let's go with Risey. Yeah, let's go with Risey. Okay, so thanks everybody for joining me. As I said, this week is not going to be very exciting. I will be reading the documentation, playing around with basics. But hopefully the next few weeks, and especially the start of July, we will be working. July will be a month dedicated to procedure-generated terrains. I will be working with the terrain. I will try to make the terrain as good as I can, to have it like having mountains, valleys, rivers, sea, and all this kind of stuff. But for now, for the next 2 weeks, this week and probably the next one, will be me doing documentation, me playing around with the basics to figure out how we're gonna make this work in a way that is visually pleasing. And yeah, I would like to raise starting poster. Yeah, terrain generation landing on planets. Yeah, exactly. Landing on planets, terrain generation. Already, you know, you can see here I have done the landing part. So you can actually already land on the planet. So you can actually, you know, this is a spaceship that comes to the planet. But of course, the fact is that the planet doesn't look like a planet right now. It looks more like a wrinkle thing. And you land on the planet, basically. This is how you land. Now, it's very fast in speed, but you can see that already it works. I have already made a basic planet. This is actually a sphere with 2 kilometers in radius, so it has enough detail to simulate a very tiny planet. And yeah, it already works. It loads very fast. It's not going to have more details, so performance-wise should be the same. But of course, performance will fluctuate because I have to add star bases, enemies, plants, trees, and all this kind of stuff. So I don't really know exactly how performance is going to do. But already it seems pretty good. It already seems pretty good. And yeah, we're doing well. Vegetation, yeah, of course, yeah, vegetation. So yeah, all those things going to be included. So thank guys, everybody, for joining here. We are ready now to raid Ryzie. So let's go and take a look at Ryzie. Thanks everyone for joining, and see you guys on the next stream. Maybe in a couple of hours, or if not in a couple of hours, I will see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.
So as far as this goes, we're basically gonna do something like this, and then it's gonna get like lighter.